Good morning YouTube! In the last video we cured a droopy headlight by replacing the bushings in the drive motor. In this video we're going to do a bit more work on this headlight pod because there's a couple of other things that we need to sort out. At some point this headlight has been removed to have some work done to replace the dip beam headlight unit in it, and when it's been put back on, it hasn't been put back on correctly. The shut line isn't right round here, so that means that as the pod comes up, it's contacting the clamshell there and it's damaging the paint both on the headlight pod and the clamshell itself. I'm also going to go and redo whatever was done to this headlight because they've also damaged the paint on the pod itself. So we're going to take this pod off, we're going to rectify the paint problems, we're going to have a look at getting these headlights out and replacing them if we need to, and then we're going to put it all back on and show you how to get those shut lines set up so that you can have this problem yourself. So start by making a note of how many shims you have underneath these two screws here and here, because it's those that you're going to use to adjust the height of the pod in the shut position. So when the pod is shut, the surface of the pod should be flush with the surface of the clamshell, and your shut line should be 5mm all the way around. So add or remove shims to adjust the height of the pod when it closes, and adjust the shut line by slackening these two screws and just moving the pod around laterally, side to side and forwards and backwards. And if all you need to do is adjust your shut lines, that's it, the job for you is complete. We're going to go ahead and remove this pod though, so we can repair that damage. And if you do want to remove the pod, you need to remove the link from the pod before we take it off. So this is the link arm there that lifts the pod up and down, and it's a bit of a cow of a thing to video, but basically we need to undo that 10mm nut there, then we can slide the link off and then undo those two screws that we were looking at in the last part of the video, and then you can lift the complete pod out after disconnecting the wiring to the bulbs themselves. So when you're doing this, the screws that stand proud of the surface, they are the mounting screws that hold the unit into the pod itself, and then the recessed ones, there's three of them, just there and there for each light, they are the adjusting screws. Now in theory, to get these out you would just be able to undo the three mounting screws and take the complete assembly out, which comprises this backing plate, the ring itself, the plastic adjusting ring and the headlight unit itself. You'd be able to remove all four of those components as an assembly. However, in this case, the mounting screws that hold this plate onto the pod itself, they're not going to come out in a million years. They're going to have to be drilled out. So the other way of doing it is to undo the adjusting screws. And then the bezel is held onto the adjusting ring with three Phillips head screws here, here and here. And I thought getting these apart was hard until I tried to find replacements for some of these parts, and then I realised that my problems were only just beginning. Now these backing rings that go inside the headlamp pod, they're not too bad. Replacements of those are available if you need them from your usual aftermarket independent Lotus specialists. But the other stuff is getting pretty hard to find. The bezels and the adjusting ring, they are obsolete now. So the original bezel is a thin plate steel item. They do tend to go rusty. If you can't save yours, then you have two options really. It's just a standard 5 3/4 inch round headlight. So some people use items off classic cars, chromed Triumph Dolomites style items. The problem we have with those is that one of the lugs, at least one of the lugs, will be in the wrong place. So the alternative option there is, because I love you and I want to have your babies, I've gone to the time and trouble of making CAD models of these, which you can get for nothing from Maker Shop, dressed down the bottom there, and get them 3D printed for a few pounds. Or if you can't bother to get them 3D printed, you can just buy them from Shapeways. The address is down there if you prefer to do that. So they are they're plastic obviously rather than the original steel, but at least they are the right colour and at least they do fit. Also, the adjusting rings. I've gone to the trouble of making new ones of those. There is a white one suitable for the beam unit, and there is a black one which has the right lug spacing for the dip unit, available from the same place. Maker Shop if you want to download them and print them yourself, Shapeways if you just want to buy them. The headlights. Now, the difficulty with the headlight is that although it's a fairly standard size, it's just a 5 3/4 inch unit, it's a raised flat glass, and they're pretty hard to get hold of. There's lots of 5 3/4 inch headlights. Lots of British classic cars use 5 3/4 inch round headlights, but they're almost all domed glass. So if you want to get that raised flat glass, they get a little bit hard to get hold of. These you can get from a few places. Your usual Lotus aftermarket suppliers will send you some of those. Be aware though, they'll usually come with a side light in them. It'll be a dip beam and side light unit, so you'll have a side light that you don't need, that you can either just leave in there disconnected or blank off. The beam unit though, I would recommend you don't get those from your usual Lotus specialist, Paul Matty's SJ Sports Cars and so on, because the ones that they're supplying at the time we're making this video, which is March 2016, come with a few things that you don't want. They come with a side light in them, which is inappropriate, and they come with the wrong lug spacing on the back, so they don't fit the adjuster ring properly. So, having paid a lot of money for them, you're expected to start taking an angle grind to the lugs on the back there and start butchering them. Now, I didn't really want to do that. They came with a couple of other things I didn't want as well. I didn't really want a mouthful of abuse from one of our common suppliers when I went to complain that these weren't really suitable replacements. So I'd recommend you don't get these from our usual suppliers. I'd recommend you go to the very helpful and very friendly Claire at Southern Electromotive Distributors, and she will go. She went to an awful lot of trouble actually to find me some Duorite items. It is Duorite part number 42276 that you're looking for, which come with a number of advantages. They are the right thing, they fit, and they're about £35 each cheaper than the ones you'll get from our usual suppliers. So if you need to replace parts, that's where to go. If you want to put them together, here's what you do. So the black ring goes with the dip unit and the white ring goes with the main beam unit. So dip unit into black ring, and then the bezel goes on from the front, and they're all screwed together through the adjuster ring and into the bezel using short 4mm screws. And then with the backing plates, remember that all four of these are different, so choose the right one for whichever pod and hole you're using, and then mount it to the light. Remember that the dip unit goes on the outside, the main beam unit is the inner light on each side. Take your light, getting it the right way up, and take your beautifully new electroplated springs and screws and assemble them to the light unit. And obviously we'll adjust the aim when they're back on the car, but now the whole unit's assembled, just drop it into the headlight pod and put the 3 4mm mounting screws in from the front. Now if you haven't already, buy yourself a big tub of copperies and use it on every single nut and bolt and screw on the car that doesn't need thread locking, so that we don't have the same problem when we next come to take these off that we had this time. So there you go, in its fully restored glory. It's a bit of a shame that you only see in the dark. Before you put the pod back in, make sure that the lock nuts on the spherical joints are free in case you need to adjust the length of these actuating links, because they're a fiddle to get at once the pod is back on top of them. And then put the pod back on and shim it out so that we've got the top surface flush with the clamshell. Then reattach the actuating link, and if necessary adjust the length of that link so that it'll sit all the way down. To get the shut lines right, that 5mm shut line that you want all the way around, we found using just some plastic 5mm screws, just putting them in the gap there, which keeps the gap nice and even. And then all that remains is to just sit back and admire it. So, God said, let there be light. And there was light. I think we've used that joke before.